This video resource will help solar contractors navigate the DIR website and find the resources to submit complete copies of certified payroll records. So first, you can just open up any sort of search bar, and then you can just type in DIR Public Works. And this will bring you directly to the Public Works page on the DIR's website. So this will be your hub for all information regarding public works and prevailing wage requirements. So I would recommend bookmarking this tab or adding it to your favorites. And then, as you can see here, there will be many helpful resource links over here on the side. So my first recommendation would be to scroll down to the bottom right here to this need help. And I would recommend that everyone sign up for Public Works emails and updates. So you can enter in your email address and then you can select what you want to receive. So I would recommend receiving DIR news releases, Public Works newsline, DAS list may be useful. DAS is Division of Apprenticeship Standards. Definitely want to get prevailing wage notices. Labor Enforcement Task Force may be useful. And then definitely Labor Commissioner's Office regulations. So after that, I would recommend coming back here to this little need help and then going through these frequently asked questions. So these will give you a nice overview of public works and questions that many people have while working on these projects. So you can kind of use these links if necessary, if you want to go straight down, or you can just start scrolling down and going through everything. So this will give you some helpful information regarding their new system, how to use it, how to use their project dashboard, helpful information regarding contractors and contractor registration. And then there is also some information for awarding bodies here. So awarding bodies can also be described as the project owners. And then one other important piece of information that we frequently get a lot of questions on is for owner operators and sole proprietors. So they do have some really helpful information here for owner operators and sole proprietors about how to report their certified payrolls. So if you were to fall under that category, I would recommend reviewing these frequently asked questions. Next, if you're a contractor, I would recommend using this contractor resource link. So here, this is going to take you down to Public Works contractor responsibilities. Number one would be to register with DIR as a Public Works contractor. So if you were to click on that link, it will take you to their registration page. So it will tell you who is eligible to register or what you need to do to register as a Public Works contractor. And then you can hit register or renew. So this will take you to the DIR's new system. So you can either register for an account, or if you already have an account, you can log in. If you were to register, you could either register as a Public Works contractor or an awarding body. You can also access some support links here if you were to click on Public Works support. So they have posted some really helpful how-to guides about interfacing with their new system, including, registering as a contractor or registering a project as an awarding body. So I definitely recommend reviewing these guides. The next step is to pay prevailing wages. So this is going to take you to the prevailing wage requirements. And here we have our resource links. So we have prevailing wage rates, apprentice rates, and then they have some labor research and statistics office. So we're going to click on prevailing wage rates. And then this is another tab that I would recommend either bookmarking or favoriting. So this is the Director's General Prevailing Wage Determinations page. So this is going to have all of the wage rates and classifications. The DIR issues 2 wage determinations every year on February 22nd and August 22nd. So they just issued these new 2025-1 determinations. So they're split into journeyman and apprentice determinations. For older or superseded determinations, we have this link here. We also have residential determinations. And then below that, we have important notices, which I would recommend reviewing because the DIR does issue some important notices or corrections to wage determinations that might affect the total prevailing wage package. So before kind of going into these, I would recommend reading this frequently asked questions on prevailing wage, because this is going to give you a really good breakdown and explanation of how to read the wage determinations and what everything means. So I definitely recommend reading through these frequently asked questions first. So let's just look at the 2025-1 journeyman determinations as an example. So if you were to click into this, it's going to bring you to this little table where you have steps 1 through step 6. So the determinations are kind of broken out by Northern California, Southern California, San Diego. We also have some statewide determinations. And then if you could not find your craft in either of these, then you would go down to step 4, county determinations for subtrades. So we'll just look at the statewide determinations first as an example. So here we have 2025-1 statewide basic trade journeyman rates. So over here we have all of the crafts or classifications. In the middle column here we have holidays, scope of work, and travel and subsistence. And on the right we have the predetermined increases. So let's just use a boiler maker or blacksmith as an example. So if we were to click in here, this is going to take you to the wage determination page. So these are the rates that have to be paid. So we have the basic hourly rate plus all the fringe benefits like health and welfare, pension, vacation, and training. And then this total hourly rate column, this is the total prevailing wage package for that craft. And all of these rates are based off of an 8-hour workday. You will also notice that there are some little footnotes here. So if you click on them, it brings you down and it explains what the footnote says. So I definitely recommend reviewing all of the footnotes. And then other important items for wage determinations are this little hashtag. This means that this craft or trade is apprenticeable, so apprentice requirements would apply. And then the last important item is the double asterisk here. So if you had a single asterisk, that means that these wage rates would be locked in for the life of the project. If you have a double asterisk like this one, that means this rate, there's a predetermined increase associated with it. So show you where to find the increase. So increase would be located here. And then if you scroll down, it's going to give you the breakdown. So it says effective January 1st, 2026, there will be an increase of $3 to be allocated to wages or employer payments. So you would know if your project was going to extend past this date that you would need to factor in this increase into your wage estimates. The other important item that you'll need here is in column 2. So you'll also want to review the recognized holidays for your craft because each trade recognizes different holidays. The scope of work is probably the most important thing you'll need. And then you'll need to review the travel and subsistence payments. So one of the big questions is what to classify workers. So in order to kind of get an idea and make a determination of what to classify your workers, you'll want to review the scope of work that is posted. So the DIR has already kind of divided, each scope of work under each classification. So you would just review, pick out some crafts or trades that you think might apply to the work that your employees are performing on site, and then verify it against this scope of work. Some important things to know are there might not be an exact scope of work that matches, in which case you can also reach out to the DIR for what's called a coverage determination. So I will get to that towards the end. But you can also, another important thing to note is that employees could perform work in the same day that might fall under two different scopes. So perhaps they did 2 hours of carpentry work and then 2 hours of electrical work. And that's fine. They would just need to be paid, for that type of work. And then you would report them separately on the payroll with those two different classifications. So if none of these crafts look like anything that matches what your employee is doing on site, you'll want to check in either step 2 or 3. So just depending on where your project is located. So let's just use Southern California as an example. So here are some additional basic trade rates for Southern California. So again, the same thing, you would go in and kind of review these crafts to see if anything might match. And then you'll verify against the scope of work. So if you still don't see any crafts here that might match anything you're doing on site, then you'll need to go back here and go into step 4 for the county determinations for subtrades. So these look slightly different than the basic trade crafts. These are broken out by county. So let's just use LA County as an example. But you would select the county of your project. That's how the rates are determined. And then it's going to bring up all of the rates for the subtrades. So obviously this is formatted slightly differently. But here we have some bricklayers, brick tenders, carpet layers, drywall finishers, electrical trades, surveying, painting, et cetera, et cetera. So here are the rest of the sub-trades. The scope of work is going to be located all the way to the right-hand side. So what I recommend doing is highlighting your craft that you want to look at so you know that you get the correct scope. And then you can just click on scope. So here are all the scopes for the sub-trades. So again, you would just need to go in and review this and see if this matches anything your employees are doing on site. And then again, these are going to be broken out slightly differently, but you'll have the basic hourly rate of pay, and then you have all of the fringe benefits such as health and welfare, pension, vacation, training, and any other benefits. And then the sum of those will be the total hourly rates, which is the total prevailing wage rate for that craft. You'll also notice that some trades have little footnotes here, so I would recommend reviewing those because sometimes they do include additional amounts to be added to the total prevailing wage rate. So after you have determined what craft or classification you'll be using, then you can start on your certified payroll reporting. But if you still need additional assistance in making what's called a coverage determination, then you can also go back to the Public Works homepage. Again, down to the bottom. So then they have Public Works contacts. And here are all of the different divisions that you can email or call if you have questions. So for anything regarding apprenticeship, they have a specific DAS Public Works email. Awarding bodies or contractor registration issues, you can email this or call this number. If you want a coverage determination or a prevailing wage classification, then you can reach out to the prevailing wage unit or email statistics@dir.ca.gov. And we do recommend to let them know, like include AB 2143 in the subject line of your email or make reference to it somehow in your correspondence with DIR. After you determine what you're going to classify your workers as, then you can see if any of the apprenticeship requirements would apply. Okay, so this is where it can be a little confusing. So DIR does have kind of like two separate apprenticeship pages. So I would actually recommend going to this top link and then hitting Public Works. I'll show you the difference. So this one kind of just gives you like a brief overview. If you go up here and go to Public Works, this will give you a more in-depth explanation of each requirement. So Public Works apprenticeship requirements apply to prime contracts that are valued at $30,000 or more, unless the craft or trade is not apprenticeable, which would be shown, there would be no hashtag on that wage determination. And these apprenticeship requirements would flow down to all subcontractors, even if their part of the project is less than $30,000. So if you go down to this blue box, you'll see the contractor's responsibilities, and they have different links here. So number one would be submit notice of contract award information for each craft using the DAS 140 form. So if you want the blank form, you can click here. So here's DAS 140 form, and it does have instructions on page 2. If you wanted to read more about the DAS 140, you can click on more information, and this will give you a nice breakdown. It will also include the labor code that's applicable for apprenticeship requirements. And then down below, we have 2 little bullet points. So it says, if you are approved to train apprentices, you must send your contract award information to your committee. If you are not approved to train apprentices, you must send the DAS 140 to all apprenticeship committees that can supply apprentices to the site of the Public Works project. So if you click on this little link, this is going to take you to the DIR's active database for apprenticeship programs in each county. So you'll select your county. We'll just use LA County as an example. And we can look at maybe carpentry. Now let's look at bricklayers. Then you would hit search. So this is going to pull up all of the apprenticeship programs that can supply an apprentice to the site of your project. So you would just need to submit your forms to these 2 committees to be in compliance. If we wanted to, let's check out maybe San Francisco County for, let's say, an iron worker. Okay, so there's only 1 apprenticeship committee in San Francisco for iron workers. So each craft or trade will have different committees, and they'll be different for each county. So just make sure that you review each of those. Next responsibility is to make training fund contributions in the amount established in the prevailing wage rate. So the training will be listed separately on the wage determination, and it will tell you what rate to pay. So contractors are required to pay that training rate for every hour worked, either to an applicable apprenticeship committee, such as a union trust fund, or you can also pay into the California Apprenticeship Council if you are not signatory to a union. So if you were to click on this top link that says make training fund contributions, this is going to take you to the DIR's fillable form. So this is going to generate what's called the CAC2 form. So you would enter in all of your information, your contractor name, CSLB, what period you're reporting for, what county your project is in, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the bottom, after you enter this little CAPTCHA code, you'll click calculate, and that's going to generate the form for you. Then you can mail that form along with your check to the California Apprenticeship Council, this PO box here. If you wanted to read more about the California Apprenticeship Council, you could click here. Or if you wanted more information on training funds, I would definitely recommend reviewing this because it does give you some specific information, such as training funds are due and payable by the 15th of the month after the work was performed. So definitely make sure to review all of this information about the training fund contributions. All right, the next contractor responsibility is to contact the applicable apprenticeship committee to request apprentices for each craft or trade on your project using the DAS 142 form. The form must be submitted at least 3 business days before apprentices are required. So again, if you were to click on this first link, this is going to take you to the blank form. This one, it doesn't have a second page for instructions, but it should be pretty self-explanatory. You would just enter which committee you're requesting from, your contractor information, project information, and then all of the dispatch request information, such as the number of apprentices needed, which craft or trade they might be from, and then the date they are to report to your company. And again, if you wanted more information, I would definitely recommend reading this. It does give you the applicable California Code of Regulations. And then it gives you some other important information. And then lastly, or bullet point number 4, contractors are required to employ apprentices in the correct ratio. So it says, be sure to employ 1 hour of apprentice work for every 5 hours of journeyman work. And then if you wanted to read more about minimum ratios, you can click on this link. So this is going to give you a nice breakdown of minimum ratio requirements. Again, it's giving you the link to the labor code. So definitely read through this and make sure that you comply with the minimum ratio requirements. And then the last bullet point here is to provide workers' compensation benefits to apprentices. And then lastly, if you scrolled all the way down to the bottom of this page, there's some additional links, like you could search for a registered apprentice here. You would just need to enter their apprentice ID, which is the first 4 letters of the last name, the first letter of the first name, and the last 4 digits of their social security number. So this will show you if the apprentice is registered in an approved apprenticeship program. You can also find the available apprenticeship committees here. Again, this will take you to their little interactive database. You can search for training funds paid to the CAC. So if you wanted to check maybe to see if your subcontractors have paid their training funds, you can just search by looking up their contractor license number. If they don't have a contractor license number, like if it's not applicable to their trade, you can click on this link. The DIR will just assign them a number. So you can kind of scroll through here or search and see if you can find your subcontractor. And then lastly, if you wanted to look at the apprentice wage determinations, you can use this link. So the apprentice wage determinations are going to be lower than the journeyman determinations, and you can only pay the apprentice wages if your apprentice is registered in a state-approved apprenticeship program. Additionally, this says there may be corresponding predetermined increases to apprentice determinations. So for the apprentice determinations, they don't post them. You need to request them separately from DIR and factor that into your estimate. So you can reach out to statistics@dir.ca.gov, or you can call their research unit. So let's just look at, we'll do 2025-1 and we'll do LA County as an example. So here it's kind of broken out by different trades. They're not in alphabetical order. I'm not sure why, but you would just have to kind of scroll through and find your trade. So let's just look at a labor apprentice. Okay, so it's going to break out the wages based on what period they are. So as they move through their apprenticeship program, they will move through, each period. I'm going to tell you their basic hourly rate and their fringe benefits. And then this is the total hourly rate that should be paid for each apprentice hour. This will be the same as the journeyman wages. If there's a double asterisk here, that means there will be a predetermined increase. If there's a single asterisk, that means those rates will be locked in for the life of the project. So going back to contractors' responsibilities, so we just kind of went through the apprenticeship requirements. And then the last responsibility would be to maintain and submit certified payroll records to DIR. So this is known as their eCPRs. So you could click here, this green button, to enter the payroll online. And then again, this is going to take you to their new service portal. So you would need to either first register with your account or log in. And then from there, you can go in and submit your eCPRs to the DIR. Again, if you have any questions, I would recommend going to their support tab and reading through their how-to guides. I believe they do have some, yeah, they have a guide about how to join a project and submit eCPRs. Okay, so going back to the Public Works homepage, if you were an awarding body or a project owner, you could review this link here. This will tell you all of the awarding body responsibilities, including registering the project with DIR. So again, we're back at their new service portal. So if you were an awarding body or a project owner, you would first need to register. So you could select register as a contractor or awarding body. And then after you create your account, you can log in and go in and register the project. Again, they do have many how-to guides I would definitely recommend reviewing. Then the last item is this little search bar up here. So this is a database, so you can actually search different items in here. So for example, if you wanted to look at AB 2143, you can search it and then it will pull up their frequently asked questions. If you wanted to, or if you needed like the blank certified payroll reporting form, you can search for that. And then it will bring you up a link directly to that form, which then you can just save to your files. And then the last extremely helpful resource that we have for contractors is called the Public Works Manual. So you can just search directly for that in their database. And then it will pull up what's called the Public Works Manual. So this is put out by the Labor Commissioner's office. So this is directly from the Labor Commissioner. It was just updated in October 2023, so it's very current. And this will give you an extremely helpful breakdown of all public works requirements. So, you can kind of scroll through this table of contents. But for example, if you wanted to know what must public works contractors do to comply with the law, if you click on this, it will take you directly to that section. And then you can kind of scroll through. This will give you a really good breakdown of certified payroll reporting, contractors' obligations. They also have an entire section for apprentice requirements, which is down here. Contractors' obligations to comply with apprenticeship standards. So you can click on this, and this will give a nice breakdown of all apprentice requirements, including any violations. So this should help you to navigate these requirements and protect yourself from penalties. So this is an extremely helpful resource for contractors that we recommend everyone review and save to your files. So other than that, that's really about it. That's all you'll need for public works requirements. Again, I definitely recommend bookmarking the tabs and signing up for their newsletter, because that will have a lot of helpful information, updates. They'll also post upcoming trainings and tutorials.